In the scorching summer of 1852, Elias Thorne sent ripples of shock through the elite circles of coastal Georgia. He declared his daughter, Seraphina, a spirited but troubled woman of 26, would be placed entirely under the authority of an enslaved man named Caleb Finch, not as a servant, not as a caregiver, but as her master in every practical sense, though the law would never acknowledge it. The distinguished families of Oak Haven County were aghast, muttering about Thorne's eccentricity. They couldn't fathom the true depths of Elias's desperation, nor the dark path Caleb Finch was about to carve for Seraphina. By Christmas, Seraphina's frail body had transformed in unimaginable ways. 5 men lay dead, and Blackwood Creek Plantation smoldered, reduced to ash. What unspeakable bond formed between that enslaved man and the plantation owner's daughter? What did he do to her that left all who witnessed it forever changed? Before we unravel this disturbing truth, take a moment to subscribe, hit that bell, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's journey back to where it all began. The summer of 1852 clung to the Georgia coast like a suffocating shroud. Heat shimmered off the marshes, and the brackish air from the inlets tasted of salt and decay. The Serpent River snaked sluggishly through the low country, its dark surface reflecting cypress trees draped in mournful Spanish moss. Vast cotton fields stretched for miles, their snowy bowls picked by hundreds of enslaved people toiling under a relentless sun. This was a land of immense wealth, built on unimaginable suffering, a prosperity extracted from human anguish, all of it rationalized by men who believed their cruelty was a divine right, the natural order of things. Blackwood Creek Plantation, a sprawling property of 1,200 acres, was Elias Thorne's legacy. He considered himself a titan among men, though in Oak Haven County he was merely an ambitious mid-tier planter. His fortune was considerable, boasting 70 enslaved people, but true power belonged to families who commanded thousands of acres and hundreds of lives. These were the names whispered with reverence, whose influence could elevate or ruin with a single word. Elias, a man with a perpetually anxious frown etched between his brows, craved their acceptance. His marriage to Clara Hastings in 1825 was strategic, bringing a respected surname and additional land. Clara, a woman of sharp intellect and even sharper tongue, produced a daughter, Seraphina, in 1826 before succumbing to fever years later. For 26 years, Elias raised Seraphina alone, his focus fixated on scaling the treacherous social ladder. He was a man of wiry build, his prematurely gray hair and gaunt features giving him a severe air. In business, he was known for relentless ambition, bordering on ruthless, yet he prided himself on keeping his word, a twisted honor among thieves. Seraphina, meanwhile, had grown up in isolation, educated by private tutors, never truly finding her place. By 1852, at 26, she was a shadow of her former self. Her body was bloated, almost 250 pounds, a result of years of potent laudanum and mercury prescribed by Charleston physicians who diagnosed her with female afflictions and a nervous constitution. She suffered violent episodes, fits of screaming and object throwing. Only the previous year, she'd lashed out, leaving a jagged scar across her father's forearm with a broken porcelain shard. The genteel society of Oak Haven County spoke of her with feigned pity. Poor Elias Thorne, burdened with such a delicate daughter. None knew the truth. None knew what Seraphina had witnessed as a girl of 10, or that her madness was not madness at all, but a perfectly rational response to living among monsters. The letter arrived on May 1st, delivered by a private courier. Elias opened it in his study, expecting plantation ledgers. Instead, 3 pages of heavy vellum, sealed with red wax, bore a symbol he recognized instantly: a serpent devouring its own tail, the mark of the sons of Kronos. The sons, 13 men who gathered in secret, performing archaic rites they believed infused the land with their will through blood sacrifice. They blended ancient European lore with dark interpretations of local indigenous traditions, believing the powerful were destined to consume the weak, metaphorically and sometimes literally. Elias had been inducted in 1835, participating in rituals that ranged from grotesque to unspeakable. The letter informed him he was in crushing debt: $15,000, amassed through reckless gambling and failed speculations, an impossible sum. Repayment meant liquidating half his land and most of his enslaved people, shattering his fragile standing. But the letter offered a reprieve, a demonstration of unwavering commitment. Elias was to publicly place his daughter, Seraphina, under the absolute authority of one of his enslaved men for a full year. The enslaved man would govern her person, her daily life, her treatments. Elias would announce this at the annual planters' ball, framing it as an extreme medical intervention. The public humiliation would be absolute. In a society where white womanhood was sacrosanct, Elias would declare his daughter's dignity worthless. In return, his debt would be forgiven, and the sons of Kronos would financially bolster his position. Elias sat for hours, his mind a whirlwind. Bankruptcy meant ruin. The sons of Kronos commanded every judge, every sheriff, every politician in the region. They could make him vanish. Or he could sacrifice his daughter's honor to preserve his own. The choice society had groomed him to make: property over person, power over morality. By candlelight, he penned his acceptance, sending it before dawn. 3 days later, another letter arrived, bearing a name and a brief history: Caleb Finch, age 33. Recently purchased from a Maryland estate through an intermediary. Skills: blacksmithing, advanced herbalism. Temperament: quiet, compliant. What the letter omitted was that Caleb Finch had been specifically chosen for this role. His placement at Blackwood Creek was no accident. He carried a simmering need for justice and the patience to wait for his moment. Caleb arrived on May 10th in a battered wagon driven by a surly slave broker. The wagon stopped directly at the main house, an unusual display. Elias came onto the porch, shielding his eyes. Caleb sat in the wagon bed. The first thing Elias noticed were his eyes. Most enslaved people avoided direct eye contact, a survival instinct, but Caleb met Elias's gaze, calm and assessing. It unsettled Thorne deeply. Caleb was tall, powerfully built, with hands calloused from a lifetime at the forge, yet his fingers possessed a delicate precision. His skin bore no whip scars. His clothes were simple but clean. The broker handed papers to Elias. Caleb Finch, as requested. Previous owner said he's quiet but learns quick. Your associates say this one was selected with care. Elias barely scanned the document. He addressed Caleb. You understand why you are here? Yes, sir. Caleb's voice was deep, resonant, with a faint northern accent. My daughter is unwell. You will be responsible for her care. Doctors have failed. You claim knowledge of herbal treatments. My grandmother was a healer, sir. She taught me before I was sold. The transaction concluded swiftly. Caleb was assigned a small cabin set apart from the other slave quarters, given basic supplies, and informed his duties would begin the next day. His sole responsibility was Seraphina's care. Failure would have dire consequences. Caleb nodded and said yes, sir, when required. Left alone, his rigid composure softened. He pulled a small, worn leather pouch from inside his tunic. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a brittle piece of paper. On it, 3 names, written in a child's uncertain hand: Lena, Isaac, Maya. His wife, his son, his daughter. Sold away from him 5 years ago to a sugar plantation in Louisiana, known for grinding lives into dust. He'd learned they all died within 2 years, Lena from exhaustion, Isaac from a fever that went untreated, and Maya, a child of 7, who simply ceased to eat, unable to comprehend why her family had been torn apart. And Elias Thorne had been the one to sell them, not for need, not for transgression, but as a demonstration of commitment to the sons of Kronos. He had shattered a family like kindling for a perverse show of loyalty. Caleb had spent 4 years working his way south, deliberately orchestrating his sales, always gathering whispers. He learned of the sons of Kronos, their rituals, their members. He learned they deemed themselves beyond reproach. When the opportunity arose to be sold to Thorne, Caleb knew this was his chance. He would have access to Thorne's house, his secrets, his vulnerabilities. Justice, he knew, sometimes arose not from courts or laws, but from patience, meticulous planning, and the willingness to become as monstrous as necessary. He refolded the paper, tucked it away, then lay back. He stared at the ceiling, beginning to plan his next move. His first day began on May 11th. A house slave, a weary-eyed woman named Bess, led him to Seraphina's second-floor room. Bess knocked tentatively. "Miss Seraphina, your father has brought someone to help with your treatments." A crash from within, then Seraphina's voice, slurred but sharp. "I don't want more treatments. Send him away." Bess glanced at Caleb with a flicker of sympathy. "She has her days." Caleb opened the door and stepped inside, closing it gently behind him. The room was large but cloaked in perpetual twilight, heavy curtains drawn. The air was thick, smelling of stale linen, cloying perfumes, and something else, the bitter metallic scent of mercury. Books lay scattered, a broken mirror glinted against the wall, clothes piled everywhere. Seraphina sat slumped in a chair by a cold hearth, wrapped in a stained velvet dressing gown. Her dark hair was a tangled mess, her face puffy, eyes unfocused. Her hands trembled ceaselessly. She looked at Caleb with confusion, then fear, then raw anger. "Who are you? I said no more doctors." "I am not a doctor, miss. My name is Caleb. Your father asked me to help you." "Help!" She gave a harsh, mirthless laugh. "That's what they all say. Help, treatment, medicine. They mean poison. They mean chains. They mean silence." She arose abruptly, swaying. "I know what this is. He's punishing me again, for remembering, for speaking, for refusing to forget." Caleb remained still, non-threatening. "What are you supposed to forget, miss?"
The question caught her off guard. Her anger faltered, replaced by a flicker of vulnerability. "You don't know?" "I know nothing, miss, only that your father says you are unwell." Seraphina studied him, really seeing him for the first time. "You're not from here." "Maryland, originally, miss." "Do you know what happens in this house? What they do in the North Wing cellar?" Caleb's pulse quickened, but his expression remained impassive. "I do not know what you mean." "Liar!" The word lacked venom, edged only with exhaustion. "Everyone lies. It's easier than truth." She collapsed back into the chair. "Leave me alone. Tell my father his newest torment failed." Instead, Caleb moved to the window and drew open the heavy curtains. Sunlight flooded in. Seraphina cried out, covering her eyes. "When did you last truly step outside, miss?" "I cannot walk that far. I'm too weak." When did you last eat without laudanum? The medicine is necessary. Doctors say so. What if the doctors are wrong? Her hand slowly lowered from her eyes. She stared at him, a volatile mix of hope and terror in her gaze. What did you say? Caleb turned from the window. This was the moment. The first card played. I said, what if the doctors are wrong? What if everything you have been told about your condition is designed not to help you, but to keep you controllable? What if your father has been poisoning you for years to ensure you never become well enough to speak about what you saw? Absolute silence. Serafina's eyes widened, her trembling hands stilled. For a full minute she simply sat there, her mind reeling. When she spoke, her voice was different, clearer. He told you. Caleb's father told me nothing, miss, but I have eyes. I know mercury poisoning. I know long-term laudanum use. Healthy women do not become like this without someone working hard to make them that way. Why would you say this? This is a trick. You're testing me. Suspicion crept back into her voice. I am telling you I can help you become truly well, clear-minded, strong enough to walk out of this room, but it will not be easy. Your body has been dependent on those medicines for years. Stopping will be painful. You will feel worse before you feel better, and your father will not approve. Then why would you do it? Caleb met her gaze. Because I have my own reasons for wanting Elias Thorne to suffer, and the best way to make him suffer is to give him back a daughter who is sane enough to remember everything and strong enough to speak about it.
The truth. Dangerous to speak so plainly, but Serafina was damaged, not stupid. She would see through manipulation, but a genuine common cause, that she might believe. You want revenge on my father? Yes, miss. What did he do to you? He sold my family, my wife and 2 children, sent them to their deaths for no reason except to prove something to men who judge worth by cruelty. Serafina absorbed this, then nodded slowly. The sons of Kronos. He sold them for the sons of Kronos. It wasn't a question. The sons, miss? You know of them? She gave a chilling, manic laugh. You will learn. Everyone learns eventually. She leaned forward. If I agree, if I let you help me, what happens then? You get well, miss, and when you are well, we decide what to do next. I have my revenge to plan. You have yours. Perhaps they align. Serafina studied him intently. Finally, she spoke. I want them all dead. My father, Judge Abernathy, Reverend Killian, all of them, every man who stood in that cellar. I want them to suffer first, to know it is coming, to beg. Then I want them dead. The venom was shocking, not for its intensity, but because it emanated from someone dismissed as mad and harmless. This was not madness. This was rage, distilled by years of suppression. Caleb nodded. Then we have an understanding, Miss Serafina. If we are conspirators, use my name. I cannot, miss. Not where anyone might hear. We must be careful. Then know something, Caleb. Serafina's eyes glittered dangerously. I have killed before. 3 house slaves who might have told my father about my lucid moments. I cannot remember exactly how. The laudanum blurs everything, but I know I did it. They disappeared. Their families were told they ran away. She smiled terribly. So if you plan to betray me, to use me, then dispose of me, know that I am not a victim. I am something worse. Ice ran down Caleb's spine. He had expected an ally, not someone whose capacity for violence might rival his own. But he kept his composure. I believe you, miss, and I will not betray you. Good. Serafina stood more steadily. Then let us begin. But I have one condition. When this is over, when we have had our revenge, I want to die. I do not want to live with what I have seen and done. You will help me with that, too." Agreed. He had not expected that, but he was committed. Agreed. Then we have a deal. Serafina extended her hand. After a brief hesitation, Caleb shook it. Her grip was surprisingly strong.
Over the next week, Caleb began Serafina's treatment. He gradually reduced her laudanum, replacing it with herbal tinctures, valerian root for anxiety and sleep, chamomile for digestive distress, milk thistle to aid her liver in processing accumulated toxins. The process was brutal. Serafina endured 3 days of fever, shaking, and violent retching. Caleb remained by her side, holding a basin, wiping her face with cool cloths, speaking softly to remind her she was not alone. When the worst passed, she was weak, but clearer than she had been in years. The constant tremors subsided. Her speech was less slurred. She could focus on reading again. Then the real work began. Caleb had her walking short distances from her room to the end of the hall and back. It exhausted her, but he insisted, a little further each day. He adjusted her diet, introducing lean meats and fresh vegetables, limiting portions. Though she fought him, years of finding solace in food made restriction difficult. As her body recovered, they talked. Serafina recounted what she'd witnessed at 10 in the cellar, describing details that turned Caleb's stomach, but he listened without interruption. She spoke of the years of gaslighting, her father convincing everyone, including herself, that she was mad, that her memories were fabrications, that nothing she said could be trusted. She revealed a hidden journal, pages documenting dates, times her father left late at night, names of visitors, and sounds from below that defied explanation. Caleb, in turn, told her of his family, Lena, who sang while working and taught their children to read despite the danger, Isaac, who at 8 could perform mathematics that amazed overseers, Maya, who loved wildflowers and adorned their cabin with wild blooms. He told her how Elias Thorne had arrived at the Maryland estate with a buyer's warrant, inspecting them like livestock, how he'd agreed to purchase all 3 for a fair price, then at the last moment changed the terms, claiming he only needed Lena and the children, not Caleb. How he had deliberately split their family for no practical reason, but simply because he could. He smiled when he did it, Caleb said quietly. That is what I remember most. My son crying, clutching my leg, begging. My wife trying to be strong, telling Isaac to be brave. And your father smiled, like it pleased him to cause that pain. Serafina listened, her newly clear eyes filled with a chilling resolve. I am sorry. I know sorry is just a word, but I am sorry you suffered because of what my father is. You are not responsible for what he does, miss. No, but I am responsible for what I do next, and I promise you, Caleb, he will pay for what he took from you. They will all pay. The formal announcement was slated for May 20th. 45 people gathered in Blackwood Creek's grand dining room for what invitations vaguely termed an important family announcement. The county's elite arrived in carriages, Judge Abernathy and his wife, Reverend Killian and his son, Marcus Fanning and his family, Walter Lyle from the bank. The meal was opulent: roasted boar, oysters, an array of rice dishes, glazed sweet potatoes, towering cakes. Throughout, Serafina sat at her father's right, eating sparingly, responding politely when addressed, but offering nothing unsolicited. Caleb served alongside other house slaves, moving silently, refilling glasses, clearing plates. He was invisible to most guests, but he listened to every word, observed every interaction, filing away vital information.
After dessert, Elias stood, tapping his glass. "My friends, thank you for joining us. As you know, Serafina has been unwell for years. We tried every treatment, doctors from Charleston, a specialist from Savannah. Nothing helped. Until recently." He gestured toward Caleb. "2 weeks ago, I brought in Caleb, who has knowledge of herbal medicine. As you can see, Serafina is much improved, clearer, calmer, more herself than in many years." Polite murmurs rippled through the room. Serafina's expression remained neutral, though Caleb saw her hands gripping her napkin beneath the table. "This improvement," Elias continued, "has led to a difficult decision. Serafina requires ongoing care, more intensive than our household can provide. After much consideration, I've decided Caleb will assume full responsibility for my daughter's welfare. He will have complete authority over her treatment, daily activities, and living arrangements, effective immediately." The murmurs shifted. Confusion now. Several guests exchanged stunned glances. Mrs. Abernathy's face registered palpable shock. Marcus Fanning spoke up. "Elias, I don't understand. You were placing your daughter under a slave's care permanently?" "I am placing her with someone who succeeded where others failed. My daughter's health is more important than social convention." "But surely," Reverend Killian interjected carefully, "there are other options. A companion, a nurse, someone more appropriate." Elias's expression hardened. "I have made my decision. Serafina agrees. Do you not, daughter?" All eyes turned to Serafina. This was her moment to refuse, to expose everything, to bring it all crashing down. Instead, she smiled, small, controlled, revealing nothing. "I trust my father's judgment. Caleb has been kind, and his treatments help. I am content with this arrangement." Perfectly delivered, but Caleb saw what others did not. Her white knuckles on that napkin, the chilling flash in her eyes, promising violence. She was playing the obedient daughter, but inside she was screaming. The evening dissolved into awkward conversation. Some guests left early, others lingered to speak with Elias privately, asking questions they preferred not to voice publicly. Caleb caught fragments. "Are you certain this is wise? What will people say? The sons of Kronos will not approve of this becoming public." That last came from Judge Abernathy, spoken low near the study door. Elias's response was too quiet to hear, but whatever he said made Abernathy nod and clap his shoulder. By midnight, all guests had departed. Serafina retired to her room. Elias retreated to his study. Caleb helped with cleanup, then made his way upstairs. He knocked softly on Serafina's door. "Come in." She sat by the window, still in her dinner dress, gazing out on the dark grounds. She did not turn. "It's done, then. I am officially your responsibility. Property of property. How absurd." "How are you feeling, miss?" "I want to burn this house down with everyone in it, but we must be patient. Is that not what you tell me?" "Yes, miss." "I agreed because I want them to feel secure. I want them to think this is just my father's eccentricity. I want them to forget about me while we work." She turned to look at him. "Did you see their faces? The disgust, the pity? They think I am pathetic. They have no idea what we are planning." "And what exactly are we planning, miss?" Serafina moved to her dresser and pulled out a wooden box. Inside lay papers covered in her meticulous handwriting. "I have been documenting everything I remember for years. Dates, names, ritual descriptions, coded so it looks like nonsense if found, but I can decode it. We have enough to destroy 20 men." "And will anyone believe us, miss?
A woman recently recovered from madness and an enslaved man? No, which is why we need proof, something they cannot dismiss, real physical evidence. She pulled out one specific page. I know where they keep their records. The sons of Kronos maintain a ledger of all activities, every ritual, every sacrifice, every member's participation. It ensures everyone is equally guilty. My father mentioned it years ago, before he realized I would remember. Where is this ledger? In the north wing cellar. There's a hidden room beyond the main chamber. I never saw inside, but I heard them talk about it. That's where they keep everything they cannot afford to lose. Caleb felt a surge of excitement mixed with dread. Such a ledger would be devastating evidence, but accessing it meant venturing into the heart of the Sons of Kronos' domain. We would need to access it when the house is quiet. My father travels to Charleston monthly for business. The next trip is June 3rd. He will be gone 3 days. That gives us 2 weeks to prepare. We need the cellar layout, every room, every hiding place. I can help. I've been thinking about this for 16 years. I know exactly what needs to happen. They spent an hour going over details, speaking in whispers. Serafina sketched the cellar layout from memory. Caleb asked about guards, keys, slave schedules. When he left her room, it was nearly 2 o'clock in the morning. He made his way to his small cabin, mind racing. He was fully committed now, a conspirator with a woman who was brilliant, damaged, and terrifying. He pulled out the paper with his family's names and looked at it by candlelight. I am doing this for you, for Lena, for Isaac, for Maya, for every person who suffered because men like Elias Thorne believe power gives them the right to destroy lives. He blew out the candle and lay in darkness, listening to the house settle. Somewhere below, in a cellar he had never seen, lay secrets that could tear apart Georgia's most powerful families. In 2 weeks, he would go down there to find them. The 2 weeks passed with deceptive calm. Serafina continued improving. Her weight dropped, her mind remained sharp. She walked further each day. More importantly, she translated sections of her coded journals for Caleb, filling in chilling details about the Sons of Kronos. The Sons, she explained, were not unique to Oak Haven County. They were part of a larger network across the South, connected societies in Charleston, Savannah, New Orleans, Richmond. Different names, but the same structure. Wealthy men who believed their power derived from ancient practices of dominance and sacrifice. They believed they continued traditions going back thousands of years, European mystery cults mixed with things learned from enslaved people. They twisted it into something monstrous, justification for things that have no justification. And the sacrifices, not always human, sometimes animals, but other times they take people who will not be missed, slaves with no family, poor whites who wander onto their properties. Once I heard my father mention a child, but I don't know if that was literal. The bodies? Swamps on every plantation. Bodies go in and are never found. Alligators do the rest. And this ledger documents all of it? Every ritual for 40 years, names, dates, descriptions. They keep it because they need mutual complicity, everyone equally guilty, so no one can expose the others without destroying themselves.
June 3rd arrived. Elias left for Charleston early that morning, taking his carriage and manservant. He would attend to business, expected back the evening of June 5th. That gave them almost 3 full days. They waited until nightfall before moving. The house settled into its evening routine. By 10, the main house was silent. They met in Serafina's room. She had changed into simple, dark clothes, allowing freedom of movement. Her hair was pulled back tightly. She looked like someone preparing for battle.
"Are you certain, miss?" "I have never been more certain. Let us go." The cellar entrance was in the kitchen, behind the pantry. A disguised door that looked like wall paneling, but pressed just right, it clicked open, revealing narrow stairs descending into darkness. The smell hit immediately. Damp earth, old smoke, and something organic and rotten. Serafina noticed his reaction. "You get used to it. I wish I could say you stop smelling it, but I'd be lying." They descended carefully, Caleb carrying a shuttered lantern that provided minimal light. The stairs were steep and worn, the wood creaking. After 20 steps, they reached the bottom. The cellar was larger than expected, easily 30 feet square, with low ceilings supported by thick beams. The floor was packed earth, the walls lined with stones weeping moisture. In the center was what Serafina called the altar, though now it looked like just a heavy wooden table. But dark stains on its surface and grooves carved into its edges told their own story. Around the room were candle holders, clay jars sealed with wax, wooden boxes, a rack holding black robes with crimson trim. Along one wall, shelves contained books and papers. Serafina moved with the certainty of someone following a memorized map. She led Caleb to the far wall, where the stones appeared solid, but she pressed one particular stone and something clicked. A section swung inward, revealing another chamber. This room was smaller, 10 feet square, and here the sons of Cronus kept their most guarded secrets. The ledger sat on a wooden stand in the center, massive, 2 feet tall and 18 inches wide, bound in dark leather with metal clasps. Next to it were smaller journals. Around the walls were shelves containing jars Caleb refused to examine too closely. "There," Serafina whispered, pointing. "That is what we need." Caleb moved to the stand and opened the book carefully. Pages of thick parchment were covered in meticulous handwriting, names and dates going back to 1810, ritual descriptions written in clinical detail like scientific experiments rather than atrocities. He began to read, and with each entry his horror deepened. These men had not just committed occasional acts of violence, they had made it systematic. Regular gatherings every 6 weeks, rituals timed to agricultural cycles, believing blood nourished the land. They had killed at least 42 people over the years, probably more. Mostly enslaved people, but also poor whites, transient laborers, anyone vulnerable. And notes about consumption. They had not just killed, they had eaten. Pieces of victims prepared in specific ways, consumed during ritualistic meals they believed transferred power. "Dear God," Caleb whispered, "this is worse than I imagined." "I tried to tell you," Serafina's voice was flat. "I watched them when I was 10. I watched them cut pieces from that woman on the altar. I watched my father raise a goblet and drink. Then I spent 16 years being told I was insane, that I imagined it all. But I knew. I always knew."
Caleb turned pages, looking for entries about his family. He found them in August 1847. 3 lines. Purchased family unit from Maryland. Woman, Lena. Children, Isaac and Maya. Separated from male to demonstrate resolve. Sent to Louisiana contact. Payment received. 3 lines. That was all his family's destruction merited. "We need to take this," Caleb said, his voice tight with rage. "No," Serafina's hand on his arm. "If we take it now, they will know immediately. We need to copy the most important entries first." She was right. Caleb wanted to burn everything,
But revenge required patience, required being smarter than the enemy. They spent 3 hours working. Serafina had brought paper and ink. She copied entries about specific rituals, focusing on one's naming current members. Caleb documented victims, creating a list of names and dates that could potentially be cross-referenced with other records. Exhausting work, made worse by the content. Several times Caleb had to stop, his hands shaking too badly. Once Serafina left the chamber entirely, overcome by memories. But slowly, methodically, they built their case, page after page of damning evidence. They were so focused, neither heard footsteps on the cellar stairs. The first indication something was wrong was when a light flared in the outer chamber, a lantern much brighter than their single lamp. Caleb looked up sharply, his blood running cold. Elias Thorne stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 other men. Behind them, at least 4 more figures lurked in the main cellar. "I must admit," Elias said calmly, "I am impressed. I did not think you would find the inner chamber." Serafina stood slowly, placing herself between her father and Caleb. "You were supposed to be in Charleston." "I was supposed to be, but I never trusted your miraculous recovery. So I made arrangements. I left this morning, yes, but I returned this afternoon and watched the house all evening, waiting to see what you would do." He stepped into the chamber, the 2 men blocking the exit. "Did you really think I would not anticipate this? That I would not prepare for the possibility you might remember, might seek revenge?" "You have been poisoning me for 16 years. Serafina's voice was steady, despite everything. "And you expect me to simply accept that?" "I expect you to understand it was necessary. You saw something you should not have as a child. You could not understand. I could not allow you to destroy everything." "I was 10, and I watched you murder a woman and eat her flesh. That was not fear, Father. That was a reasonable response to witnessing evil." Evil, such a simple word. Elias moved further into the room, his eyes shifting between Serafina and Caleb. "And you, using my daughter to get to me, filling her head with ideas of revenge?" Caleb said nothing, calculating distances and odds. 7 men against 1, with Serafina in no condition to fight. The situation looked hopeless. Elias seemed to read his thoughts. "Do not do anything foolish. I do not want to hurt either of you, not permanently, but I cannot have this rebellion continuing." He gestured to the men behind him. "Bring them upstairs. We need to discuss what happens next."